Welcome to Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which I, Toby Haydock, ask a friend to nominate a Doctor Who story and secretly choose their favourite things about it. I then watch, commentate along, and see if I can guess what those favourite things are.
Hi, Toby. Thanks for inviting me to this podcast. I am very honoured to be here talking about one of my favourite stories of all time. When Toby first emailed me, the first thought came to my mind was, I want to do the Romans, and I was so happy no one had done it yet. For episode 1, I have chosen a scene, and for episodes 2, 3, and 4, I have chosen dialogue. And then for my fifth and final moment, I'm talking about the entire story as a whole, and I've chosen one particular scene, which is my absolute favourite part of the entire story. So good luck, Toby.
Well, it's ancient Rome versus modern time travel, and it's ancient fan, Toby. Me meets modern fan, young Josh Snares, from over the other side of the world as well, but who's communicated worldwide brilliantly and inventively and pioneeringly in terms of internet usage and quality of filming and equipment and visual style, and also very engaging sort of personality and observations. I'm a big admirer of Josh, so very pleased that Josh, who you heard in the introduction there, has lent a bit of modernity to this fusty old codger here with his his microphone made of wattle and daub and his brain made of trilobites and antediluvian materials. Right, so anyway, yes, thanks to Josh, I've just spoken for 53 minutes on the trot about episode 1 of the Romans, having worried when it started that I wouldn't have many things to say about it. So I'm carrying on while I'm ahead. So I'm because sometimes I haven't actually done one of these where I've watched the whole story in one go in a while, because I kind of have to fit stuff in between stuff. But and I'd have to wait till the other half's asleep in order to fit in an episode, or maybe two. But I don't feel like I've had a good run at anything. So this is quite fun. I'm enjoying this, even though it's only episode 2. All roads lead to Rome. So I would like you to take the same path as I through this story. It was January 1965. Well, I'm recording this in January 2023. And we're going to start with episode 2 of the Romans. I've just remembered, of course, because the rescue is one of the few Doctor Who stories that begins on that has an episode on January the 2nd, which is my birthday. So so I'm recording this. In fact, I'm recording this when episode 2 of the rescue went out, but a few years later. So this episode is in 2 weeks' time from now, but 58 years ago. Goodness me. So here we go. We are going to start episode 2, 58 years. That's extraordinary. And how would any of those people have even considered that somebody was born 9 years after this would then, 58 years after they were all convening at an army drill hall to rehearse something that they thought would go out once, would be poring over it on a giant screen. It's not a screen, it's a wall, projected onto a wall, in its third physical release. I've had this on VHS and on DVD, and now I have it on Blu-ray. Oh, it's extraordinary. It's extraordinary, and especially as it's a story that even within the sort of disposable, framework of Doctor Who as made then, this was a sort of funny, silly one as well. I don't think anyone thought they were making anything other than something that was a bit of a lark. But we all need a bit of a lark. And again, I've just done the Caves of Androzani, which is grim and dangerous and deadly, but works because it exists within the multi-genre universe of Doctor Who. You wouldn't want all Doctor Who to be like the Caves of Androzani, but the fact that the Caves of Androzani is like the Caves of Androzani makes it so damn special. And you could say equally the same of the Romans. If all of Doctor Who was like the Romans, it would be annoying. It would be lightweight. It would be slightly irritating, I think. But because this exists, a couple of weeks after the Dalek invasion of Earth, which is a grim post-apocalyptic, resistance fighting, epic, and a few weeks before a psychedelic insectoid lunacy fest, and everything that the eclecticism of Doctor Who, and yet it's all the same program. That's it's wonderful. One of its many wonderful elements. So yeah, I wouldn't want all Doctor Who to be like the Romans, but I like the fact that when I'm scanning my shelf, I'm going, what sort of Doctor Who am I in the mood for today? One day I will be in the mood for the Caves of Androzani, and another day I will be in the mood for the Romans, and both will satisfy me in totally different ways, and yet both will be recognisably Doctor Who. So let's see what I recognise as all roads lead to Rome, but currently lead to the countdown in 3, 2, 1 to press play on the second episode of the Romans. And here we are. So I think that might have started slightly late because I'd watched the beginning when I watched the previous one, but I don't think anybody seriously times these, and even if you tried, you couldn't, because there's always a bit of a delay. So I'm not going to fret over that, although the part of it will be fizzing in the back of one of my synapses now, going, this isn't quite right, it'll be slightly out of sync, even though it's always slightly out of sync, and that's going to bother me probably till the day I die. But anyway, here is Barry Jackson, Drax in the Armageddon Factor. He's also Garvey in Mission to the Unknown and Galaxy 4, because he appears at the end of Galaxy 4 in the lead-in to Mission to the Unknown. Was also known in the business as a stuntman called Jack Barry. So it's not just he's not just been hired as an actor. He was quite an acrobatic stuntman and stunt arranger. Although later in life, didn't do the stunting because he was a very busy character actor. He's the guest lead, isn't he, in Blake Seven's Is It Mission to Destiny, which is the sort of murder mystery one, and a regular in Midsummer Murders as the pathologist. But there he is, out of the window and out of the story. He's quite a regular. He's throughout the story in the novel, which I remember being really annoyed about because it was the days before you could get stories on video. So the fact that Donald Cotton, who'd written brilliant novels of the Mythmakers and the Gunfighters, his own stories that I didn't really understand and now adore, had the audacity to write the Romans and to not fastidiously transcribe the script so that I could enjoy the story as broadcast. I've gone through this metamorphosis with many things. It's a bit like the animations, where it's just like they have to be as close to the original as possible. They're never going to be. They're animations. Cartoons do not look like live action. So actually, I've gone through a real journey of that, going, no, if you can take advantage of the animation medium to make this look more visually arresting, then do so. There's no point in tracing what could have been, quite flat, sort of landscapey, no camera cuts because of the small amount they were able to do, the limited canvas, and the books that are more valuable are the ones that tell the same story that we have on video in a different way, or a fresh way, or a reinterpreted way, or a more insightful way. But that's because, of course, we now have ready access to the videos. When I was furious about the novel of the Romans, we didn't have ready access. So what Donald Cotton was doing was betraying consecrated text. I also have a thing that has a resentment I've hung on to for over a decade, is that there's one of the fun bits of the commentary of this was when we decided to have Barry Jackson in at the beginning of episode 2, and then to fall out of the commentary when he gets thrown out of the window. Now I think, which I think is a funny idea, now we just keep him. In fact, I once did I did a commentary for Phantom Films where we, at the last minute, changed the episode of The Green Death we decided to have John Levine on the commentary for, and only when we got to the end of it did we realise he wasn't actually in that episode, but we still talked for the whole of it. You'd keep Barry in and he could talk about the general principles of TV at this time and blah-de-blah-de-blah-de-blah. But we had him fall out of the window, fall out of the commentary. So, of course, everybody else turns and he's going, well, bye-bye, Barry, bye-bye, nice to see you. And nobody's looking at the picture, and nature abhors a vacuum. And my job as moderator of the commentary is to, steer things. But I didn't want to stop everyone saying goodbye to Barry. So I said, and Barry Jackson's off there, but he will return to Doctor Who in Mission to the Unknown and the Armageddon Factor. And then I foolishly went on to Gallifrey Base. I think sometime later, because I know that I'd helped this person who'd wanted to get some dates of when some of the commentaries were recorded. So I very helpfully filled in the ones that I knew because I'd been at them. And then I sort of criticising what I'd done here, because she said, well, there's a bit in the commentary of the Romans where he says when Barry Jackson returns Doctor Who, but none of those people in the room were in those stories, so that will have meant nothing to them. It's like, no, I wasn't saying it to prompt them. I was saying it because nobody else was paying attention to the commentary at that point apart from me, and I thought off the top of my head that would be a useful thing to throw in whilst their attention returns. And I don't know why I'm having to justify this. I didn't say any of this. Of course, it's been brewing in the back of my head ever since. And I don't want to be one of those, you don't want to be one of those people who writes an autobiography that's, where every chapter ends with, and naturally I had the last laugh, where lots of sort of petty grievances are cathartically exorcised through the moment of sort of, petty revenge or one-upmanship. But it just hit me that, God, you can't do anything with the outlook of a Doctor Who fan. Sometimes whatever you might do as somebody contributing to a Doctor Who product that isn't actually Doctor Who itself, whatever you do, people are gonna just assume the worst, or criticize you for whatever you've done, even if what you've done is they're never going to take the more reasonable interpretation of your action there, which was just, I was covering a silence and keeping it going and thinking off the top of my head, and I have that knowledge to be able to impart when nobody else is looking at the screen to cover the silence. And here we are back again. But no, that's not good enough. What was he thinking doing that? And you're like, oh, thanks a bunch. So that taught me never to go looking on Gallifrey Base, but I never gave them any more dates. I'll tell you that for sure. But anyway, one of the first things I knew about the Romans was that Gerton Klauber, playing the Galley Master, recreated his Galley Master role from the Carry On film. And it was only when I was researching for the commentary that I did for this that I realised that I discovered that wasn't true. A thing that I'd assumed and known to be true because it was mentioned in Doctor Who: A Celebration was actually not true, because he's not the Galley Master, is he? He's I think he and Alf Garnett, Warren Mitchell are Marcus and Spensius. They sell things. That's the gag. But he is in Carry On, Cleo Gerton Klauber. So his casting is perhaps an echo of that. And Gerton Klauber returns to Doctor Who in the Macra Terror as Ola, but of course I cannot mention that in good company, lest it be somehow taking away from some observation somebody else was going to make. This, as woman prisoner, is the wonderfully monikered Dorothy Rose Gribble, who I interviewed in her sort of elderly accommodation that she was at, which I think is where Downton Abbey is filmed. I could be wrong. But I'd written to her, and her nephew got in touch and said, well, you by all means come and visit when I'm visiting her. And so I went to see Dorothy Rose, who didn't have a huge career as a sort of television or theatre actress, but did do lots of poetry recitals and things like that, and was still sort of always doing stuff. And she was very sweet, and her Who's Round was released after she died, so she was a bit she wasn't she wasn't the most lucid, shall we say, interviewee, but she was delightful. And here's Michael Peake as Tavius, who, when I recorded the commentary for this, he was a mystery. It was do we know what became of him? He sort of stopped acting, not long after this, and Christopher Barry didn't know, and we've since discovered that he's one of the first actors to die from Doctor Who. There we are, folks. Oh, I didn't mention that about Bart Allison, who's Maximus Battalion. He's one of the few Doctor Who actors to have been born in the 19th century. He was born in 1890. And Michael Peake, who plays Tavius, and it's a lovely performance with those wonderful gravelly tones that he has, which suggests to me that why this next news is not perhaps a surprise, because he sounds like he's been smoking Bensius and Hedges as Eos. In ancient Rome, he's got a lovely smoker's tones there. That sounds like it's not good news for Dorothy Rose there. Dorothy Rose Gribble, what a wonderful name. Lovely lady. And I love the fact that, all those years later, I interviewed her in 2013, I think. So again, all those years later, there she was in an old people's home. Some weirdo comes and sits in a little room that she's got and talks to her about her remembering that she had a spot on her nose when she was in Doctor Who, and she couldn't really write and particularly well. So I've got this sort of spidery Dorothy Rose Gribble written in my early years book. And I brought a photo as well, but I printed it on some really overly shiny paper and used a sort of metallic pen, so it didn't. That autograph hasn't really survived, unfortunately. And this is great, isn't it? That I'm not commentating much on the action. Sorry, this is I remember the picture of this seeming. Again, in the early years, made these scenes seem not unlike the scenes one was used to from, Spartacus and things like that, where they were done on much bigger sets with much greater resources. But actually, they pull off the illusion here. There's a pleasing amount of extras, all bare-chested as well, and it's sort of pleasingly realistic and grim. And you could tell there's water in the studio, though. That's no mean feat. But you could tell there's kind of a couple of stagehands with buckets chucking water on. But I think that's effectively done as Doctor Who's version of a similar scene in Spartacus. Obviously compromised. Oh, now. Behind Doctor Who there, as he enters the marketplace with his back to us, the short lady is Francesca Bertarelli, who is one of the Coal Hill school pupils. So she is returning from the first ever episode of Doctor Who and the pilot. The school pupils were the same in both. And there she is. And apparently all the people at Corona Stage School, where she was from, fancied her. Fraser Hines fancied her. But then again, that's not a surprise. She was a lady and alive. And there she is. You can see her back to us there. She's sadly no longer with us now, but she had she did a children's film foundation film, did bits and bobs of other stuff, did a bit of modelling. Was Phil Collins' sister-in-law, was a Playboy bunny. But you can find out all about Francesca Bertarelli if you've come to a commentary on the Romans to be led to discover things about its non-speaking background artists with their back to the camera, by listening to my Class of 63 Far Too Much Information, which tells you everything about all the school pupil extras in An Unearthly Child. Even the two men in the market are interesting. One of them is John Caesar, who plays lots of small roles in Doctor Who, sometimes uncredited, but he gets some decent speaking parts in things like the Sea Devils, and is also a Monoid 4, I think he is. And the other one is Ernest Jennings, who has a speaking part here, but then returns to Doctor Who only as an extra. And he's the guy in Mind Warp who he's an old rebel who they find and he dies. I think he's called Vern. He's got a name, and I think he has a little bit of dub dialogue over him, but he's not credited because it is an extras part. And Tuzer goes, "Oh no, Vern he's the same age as me," and you go, "Oh God," because he's aged 9. Well, that was Ernest Jennings. I remember being thrilled to discover that an episode I'd seen, Mind Warp, had got an actor who was in The Romans, which was old Doctor Who that we can't touch and reach, and has people from ancient times in it. Although I was saddened that an actor who was credited and had a speaking part in The Romans was now doing non-speaking, non-credited extra work. But that's those are my own little preoccupations. The Ian and Delos stuff is very different in the book because they hate each other in the book, and I think that's rather a shame because their friendship in this is rather nice. and I like the fact that they have this kind of bond. And Peter Diamond, who was a brilliant stuntman, and I think he's responsible for the sword fight in The Prince's Bride, which is one of the great movie sword fights. But he pops up in Doctor Who quite a lot in the early years. And he came and gave talks at the Ludlow Festival, as did Derek Ware. But I met Derek, another Doctor Who stuntman, but I never had the pleasure of meeting Peter. And he was still working when I think he had a stroke when he was driving back from the set of Heartbeat that he was still working on when he died. And I met his son recently, actually, Fraser, and couldn't answer a couple of queries that he had, which I felt bad about. But anyway, nice to make contact, and I think Fraser is still, holding the flame for his dad's legacy, and rightly too. A great contributor to Doctor Who and to TV and film, still going when he died. It's a shame we didn't get a chance to talk to him about his work, because the stunt guys are always really interesting. But he's a stunt guy who's a decent actor. Which is always a very useful combination when you're doing telly at this time, and why people like him and Derek Ware got a decent amount of work, because they could handle the acting as well as they could handle the stunts. But yeah, I like Ian and Delos' relationship in that, even though it is a sort of totally serious element of the story. Ian and Delos don't really get to have an awful lot of fun. And I suppose the story needs that, because Barbara's about to get into Farceville with the delightful Nero. Oh, and here's Michael Peake back again, who I interrupted myself. Michael Peake is he the third actor to die from Doctor Who, or maybe he's the fourth? Jack Cunningham, the jailer in the Reign of there's Jean Conroy from the Dalek Invasion of Earth, who actually dies before her episode goes out. So she, her appearance in Doctor Who is posthumous, which I remember discovering, and being quite moved by it, and then putting it on Facebook, and somebody was a dick about it. Stop harbouring these resentments, Toby. Somebody going, oh, that's just what was it? Asperger's pointlessness or something like that. I thought, no, it's not. It's really interesting. Anyway, but naturally, I had the last laugh. No, I didn't. It's just annoying. But anyway, this is my space. I do what I want now. And anyway, I wonder if John Caesar got cast because of his name. That's not John Caesar, that's Tony Lambden. I don't know anything about him. I should find something out about him, really. But yes, Michael Peake, I think it goes Jean Conroy, then Jack Cunningham, and then it might be Jack Bly who plays Gaptooth, and then Michael Peake, or the other way around, Gaptooth in The Smugglers. But Michael Peake dies in 67, 68, something like that. So that's why his acting career stops in the late 60s, because he did. So he's not long for this world, even now. In this, he's in the Gorgo with Patrick Troughton. I think they're both policemen in it, but he's got a great face and a nice presence. Although he does do a bit of comedy stuff here, even though he's one of the more serious characters, because he's revealed to be a Christian, of course, at the end. But he's doing sort of sotto voce, glancing around suspiciously, acting here in order to do a kind of. This is the cross purposes, farcy stuff that we've got going on, where, Tavius thinks he's talking to Maximus Battalion and is sort of, tipping the wink and metaphorically tapping the nose, and Hartnell's, being totally credulous, and it's sort of comedic cross purposes. And here we have Nero, played by Derek Francis, friend of Jacqueline Hill, which is why he ended up doing it, not from nepotism, but from he was a highly regarded actor who they were lucky and grateful to have. But Jacqueline Hill was a sort of entry point for them. Although I was interested to notice, because it's the sort of thing I find interesting, there's no star guest billing for Derek Francis in the Radio Times, and that is for other actors in this period. and sometimes character actors like Donald Morley and Keith Part and John Ringham who weren't names. So you'd think if they got a Radio Times billing, Derek Francis definitely would. Maybe there just wasn't space that week, or they decided not to do it. That stuff usually came as an edict from the production team, and maybe whoever was in charge was going, we aren't doing guest star billings at the moment. But Francis was definitely well known, and he's certainly. He's the performance of the piece. He's the character of the piece in a story that has quite a lot of traffic. As I mentioned last week, only Derek Sidney is in all 4 episodes, aside from the 4 leads. I love this comedy of, but it's the Emperor's New Harp, isn't it? It's everybody. Sucking up to the, because of course there's a threat of execution upon a whim. So the comedy comes from actually the dangerousness of the situation. That Nero not only has power, he's also potty, but dangerous and prone to kill on a whim. And I love that business with the whatever that horrible piece of meat is that he's had a bite out of and now given to the doctor. And we shall come to Tigellinus, open brackets, cupbearer, close brackets, later. That's Brian Proudfoot at Nero's side. And yes, this whole Hartnell sniffing the leg, that's a bit like when Sylvester McCoy listens to the apple, isn't it? That's nice. And Tom Baker sniffs things, doesn't he? And then of course you've got David Tennant, sticking his finger in the jar of marmalade and licking the mahogany. Yeah, suddenly I like the doctors sort of do those sort of animalistic sense stuff to suggest that there's intellect there, but there's also heightened other senses. I quite like that. But yeah, the whole thing of the doctor having painted himself into the corner of being the greatest harp player and the lyre player in the world, but he can't actually play the lyre, opens us up to some great comic potential. Whereas on the other side, you've got Ian and Delos, sort of slightly stuck and on the run, and they're at the held prisoner. And then Tavius, even though he's done that sort of oi, oi, shh, come over here, sort of acting with Hartnell there, is quite a serious character for much of it, and sort of Barbara's sort of safety net and confidant, and their relationship is rather touching. Maureen O'Brien is perfect for this stuff. She has such a sense of fun. She evokes sort of fun. And here is the dead centurion, but you don't want to be paying Dennis Edwards, who's been hired as an actor last week, to come back and play the same part a week later, because you'd have to pay him his actor's fee to do so. So those legs and knees belong to Vez Delahunt, who is one of the Thals in the Daleks, and he crops up later as a unit soldier in the Silurians as well. I think there's a confusion because his name is rendered differently. But I think worked out which Sylvester Delahunt he was, because Vez, it took me ages to work it out, is short for Sylvester. But he was generally a supporting artiste. The Thals really are supporting artists, but they do get a credit in episode 7 of the Daleks. That's not a great zoom it does in on poor old Dorothy Rose Gribble, who obviously has been chatting to Barbara and will then act as a conveyor of information from Barbara to Ian, because they've been held in the same prison. That's yes. So the episode ending is Ian catching sight of some stock footage of lions and having to look very serious, which shows the different dramatic styles within this particular story. That we've gone from the sort of high campery, if you like, of the the very silly Nero. Although, you know, there is danger there. You know, he's played comedically, but there's, you know, we're never far away from that suggestion that if you play this guy wrong, you know, he'll, you know, it's curtains. I went off piste there quite a lot. So I think the idea that I might find a line of dialogue to tie in with what Josh likes, I think is going to be impossible. So I'm just going to have to go my own path. Also, I think because Josh is going, what did I like about the Romans, rather than here are a series of grievances as a result of me doing commentaries about Doctor Who or discovering facts and conveying them into the great universe of Doctor Who that have not been greeted with in the way that I would like by occasionally one person, and so I will ignore all any nice stuff that I've received as a result of my travails and still fixate upon the phraseology of two individuals who responded in a way I don't like to what I've done, which is where madness lies, and which one must not do, and which I like to pride myself that I don't do, and I clearly do. But naturally, I had the last laugh, and the laugh, I think, is what it's all about. The towering over, I think, for me, the Romans is somebody who makes their debut in this episode, and it's Derek Francis as Nero. It's the best performance in the piece. He's the best character in the piece, and in a piece that is sort of tonally quite disparate, and you know, so and the comedy can't be in places, can't go too far, but it also means that the drama is never quite as dramatic as you necessarily want it to be because of the comedic backdrop. I think the consistency of what Derek Francis brings to the table with his very entertaining and very enjoyable performance as Nero is a real asset to a story that needs that colourfulness of performance amid because a lot of the comedy is physical and farcical, and that farce trademark of people missing each other, and miscommunication or cross communication or even missed proximity. You need something that's a kind of anchor for that, and that's Derek Francis as Nero, who is, I think, on balance, the best thing about the whole adventure, and he makes his debut there. And I do love that scene where the Doctor gets out of playing the liar, although he is playing the liar, but that brings us to what I think will be the best line of next week's installment, and I think Josh will probably choose one of the lines from that scene. But then again, I thought he'd probably choose the vase on the head, and he didn't. So I'll be true to me, and I will choose Derek Francis as Nero, because under ordinary circumstances, if Josh hadn't said what they were going to choose and the nature of what they were going to choose, I'd have got in early with Nero, because to me, I don't think you can list the best things in the Romans and not list Derek Francis as Nero. So if I hadn't had that knowledge of what Josh was going to say, I'd have done Francis. So I'll give him his dues. Derek Francis is my favourite thing about episode 2 of the Romans, whereas Josh is going to choose a line from this episode, which I think might be from that scene, but I could be wrong.
So for episode 2, I've chosen a line of dialogue, and it's very early on in the episode. It's during the first scene where William Hartnell is having a little battle, and the line is, "I tend to forget the delights and satisfaction of the arts, the gentle arts of fisticuffs." It's so much fun, and it's so silly, and I just love the idea of the First Doctor just absolutely railing on people, just constantly starting fights and talking about how he used to train a fighter, and it's just brilliant. And I'm waiting for the Big Finish audio spin-off of William Hartnell just absolutely throwing it. And you know what? Bring it back. Bring back this fighting doctor. I want to see Jodie Whittaker like punch the hell out of a sea devil or something. Just bring it back.
And actually, you see, because I was fixating upon the injustice of the misinterpretation of my smoothing out of the conversation as Barry Jackson exited the commentary, meant I didn't talk about the gorgeous fight scene that Hartnell has with him, which is great fun, which is very silly, and which is rather delightful. And I love the word fisticuffs. That's great. And yes, it has that marvelous thing of, I often consider one of the great strengths of Doctor Who is that the Doctor is largely pacifistic, and doesn't kill except for when he does, and doesn't get involved in violence except for when he does. But that idea that the Doctor, that there's something about the old-fashioned arts of combat, which somehow have a sort of sense of fun and honor about them, which is totally at odds with physical violence, but within certain genres or in certain times or in certain circumstances can be a thing that is evoked, and it's delightfully so there. Fits Hartnell like a glove. Seeing this bungling assassin in a scene that's not pulled off perfectly, it has to be said. I think the ambition of the scene is perhaps greater than its execution, which is it's still not why I didn't talk about it. I was fixating on a grudge like an idiot. It's great, and it's again sort of unlike anything that you'd have had really in the first year of Doctor Who, and is showing something different that Doctor Who can do within its format, that it does with a great sense of glee and a great sense of fun, and Hartnell embraces it. And yes, he embraces that idea that the Doctor enjoys engaging in the art of fisticuffs. Fisticuffs is a great word as well. So I wouldn't have chosen that anyway, but I might have actually, if I'd been doing this episode properly, chosen the fight scene at the beginning, because it is great fun, and poor old Barry Jackson, who actually doesn't end up doing that much. I remember thinking Ascaris must have been a really, really important character. He's gone, a minute and a half into episode 2, never to be seen again. But and what a career he had. Oh, bless him. Yeah, I could have chosen that, but instead I got distracted by cathartically enunciating something from the recesses of the resentment box in the back of my head, which is no way to be. So hopefully that has now flown like a mute assassin out of a window, never to be seen again. But I know there's lots of fun to be had in subsequent episodes of The Romans, so whatever happens, we haven't had the last laugh. Thank you very much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydock, and my guest, Josh Snares, who can be found on Twitter at Josh_Snares, and who, more importantly, I think, is also on YouTube at youtube.com/Josh Snares, where there is loads of content. I'm grateful to Josh, and of course to the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Steve Manfred, Mr. Withit, Chris Bone, Jeff Sear, Philip Marsh, Tom Hunter-Watts, PDT, Mark Cockram, Stephen Moffat, Rhys Williams, Chris Williams, Rich Wiggins, Kevin West, Peter Ware, Gavin Ware, Alistair Wallace, Jeff Walker, Gary Wales, Lee Wakerley, John Turner, Fanman Sang, Sidney Truitt, Jason Thompson, Richard Thomas, Dr. Gary Thomas, Jason Taken, Paul Taylor Greaves, and Mark Swan. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. Would you like your name read out on the credits? Well, if you would, that's one of the many bonuses you get if you go to patreon.com/Toby Haydock, where you can get bonus releases. There is a whole podcast just to yourself. There are Ask Me Anythings. The last one clocked in at 2 hours. So you can ask me what you like, and I can promise my answers won't be monosyllabic. Whether that's a good thing or not is for you to decide, and it's for you to decide whether it's worth £3 per month, or more if you like, but the lowest tier, where all of the audio and video content, all the content, I hate that word, is available for £3 a month. There are other little inducements to take you higher up the tier section, which, I mean, goes up to £1 million if you want. But £3 a month is more than enough, and I'm very grateful. And that gets you, yes, as well as the name in the credits, you get bonus releases, you get advance releases, you get stuff that is just for you, and you get pictures of my dog and a few little bits from my archive as well. And 3 releases per week, which is not bad. And you get a 10% discount if you pay for a year in one go. If you can't subscribe to the monthly thing, there's Ko-fi, where you can just buy me a virtual coffee whenever you like, if you've particularly liked a podcast, or I sound particularly hungry, or you're feeling particularly flush. It's the way that we do things now. It seems very odd to come cap in hand to you, and I expect nothing. I am grateful to you for listening, especially if you've listened this far, because the podcast is kind of over. And listening is what keeps these going, because if nobody was listening, I would just be shouting into thin air. But what you could do, if and I know times are tight, so financial support is not desirable or possible for the vast majority, I'm sure, but you could go to iTunes, Podbean, anywhere on the internet, and scream out loud your enjoyment of these in the form of 5-star ratings everywhere you can. They really helps to separate us in the world of algorithms, and leave a few lines saying what you like about these, which really helps the discerning audience member to get an idea of what's going on and maybe decide to give it a try themselves. And again, that's really what this is all about, is getting people to listen and hoping that people enjoy what they listen to. So that's patreon.com/Toby Hadoke, kofi.com/Toby Hadoke, or just anywhere on the internet saying nice things. I run a comedy club in Manchester called Excess Malarkey. That's on Twitter at Excess Malarkey. If you're in the vicinity of Manchester, come to us on a Tuesday night at 8 p.m. I am on social media at Toby Hadoke on Twitter. These podcasts have their own feed at Hadoke Podcasts, and I have a Facebook page. I have a personal one that I'm sort of now trying not to use for people I don't know. So there is a work one, which is a page for me as a comedian, writer, actor. So go to that one. That's where all the work stuff will be put, and hopefully all the stuff that will be of interest to you, rather than the fact that it's my uncle's birthday. Do you know what I mean? I don't know what to say to the end credits for this one. But all right, fact fans, I'm recording this post-end credit sequence first of the 4 Romans ones, and I don't quite know why. I think it's because, I'll tell you why it is. It's because I'm opening my recent documents on GarageBand. They're not called documents, are they? Files. And this one's at the bottom, and the Romans one has dropped off. So I need to do the Romans one, but if I went back and did that first, this would then drop off. So then I'd have to go looking for that, because it won't be in the drop-down menu. So because this is in the drop-down menu at the bottom, I'm doing this one first, and then I'll probably do episode 3, and then I'll go back and find episode 1, because it then doesn't matter if episode 2 drops off. That's an insight into the intricate workings and methodology of your podcast producer, or man on his sofa speaking into a microphone and doing things in a slightly disorganized fashion. God, this is the stuff the archaeologists will pore over, isn't it? And I bet they'll go, and if you compare it to the output of the Chris Ramsey, Married, Shagged, Annoyed podcast, their post-credit sequences recorded according to release of podcast, or whether it is a 60-bit amplified Dolby surround system or whatever. The true crime podcast Death in the Afternoon only had 3 post-credit sequences, and they were recorded in order of the star signs of its host. Do you know what I mean? No, you don't, because I'm talking absolute baloney. Anyway, that's the post-credits bit. There's always one. Sometimes I think I go off into quite interesting tangents, or suddenly remember something I've forgotten, or do a fun bit of witty improvisation. Sometimes it's a load of old bobbins, and that's what that was. So you can put that in your... Those yes, hey, hello, archaeologists of the future. You can put this in the subcategory of bobbins ones for when you do your complete and definitive history. That's never going to happen, I know that, of the Toby Haid Oaks Time Travels podcasts / Happy Times and Places / bad ones. I'm going now.